The exhibition is called Offering a Possibility, and I chose this name because I feel like we're living in a time where a lot of people politically aren't very satisfied. So I wanted to remind the audience that there's still a lot of love and joy in the world that's immediately surrounding you, and kind of give that possibility of hope. My primary medium is oil or acrylic on canvas, and I have one painting that is on panel. I come from mixed ancestry, so my mom is Korean, but her parents were from North Korea and they came to South Korea, and then when my mom was 12, they immigrated as a family to Argentina. And then my dad is from Uruguay, but my grandfather is from Spain, so he came from Spain to Uruguay. So I always thought about how they say it's 1 in 400 trillion chance of being born, but for me, because my ancestors come from so many different countries, I feel like it's more in 1 in 800 trillion. So I feel very blessed to have this opportunity on Earth, and because of that, I feel like I should take as much advantage of it as I can by following a life that I feel is my purpose and what I want to be doing with my time. So I got my Bachelor's of Art in sociology. My major was sociology from Rutgers University. When I graduated from college, I was afraid to be in the real world, so I moved to Barcelona, Spain for 2 years where I taught English. And then I moved back from Barcelona, Spain and got a real office job, which there are really great benefits to having an office job. I loved the schedule because I knew that I'd have every weekend off and I knew that I'd have every evening off, but I didn't feel like it was the right job for me. So I remember living in LA and having a roommate say, "Oh, Jen, you know that painting course that you were thinking about? Here are my paintbrushes, go take that class, you need to take it." And I drove home after the first day of class in tears because I knew for the first time in my life this is what I was meant to be doing. So that was back in 2012, and I basically worked extremely hard. Like, I had my 9 to 5, but then I started a post-bac at UC Berkeley Extension in visual art. So I would go to school in the evenings and then go to my studio in the evenings and on the weekends so that I could apply to graduate school and go to UC Santa Barbara, which I just graduated from in June with my Master of Fine Arts. So when I went to graduate school, I was really taught to dig deep into who I am as a person and express that in my work. So the work that I was doing previously felt very disconnected to my personality and who I was. So I started really digging in and realizing that I'm a very happy, positive person, and I wanted to kind of highlight the things in my everyday life that I take for granted or that I may not always notice all the time, in a way to celebrate them. So I started painting a lot of things from the home. So for example, I did this painting that's a triptych called Hide and Seek, and it's of a plant that sits at the edge of my couch that I love staring at because it brings me so much joy in a strange way. But most of the time, when we have houseplants, we kind of forget about them unless we have to water them. And hopefully you water them so that they don't die on you, which can happen as well. So by taking this plant and kind of highlighting it and painting it in these really vibrant colors, I paint it in a way that you can't ignore it anymore. It's very obvious and kind of becomes the focal point. A lot of what I do too to make such clear lines is use tape. So I really like painting with tape because you can get very messy with your paintbrush, but then once you peel it off, it becomes like a very clean and crisp image. Another subject matter that I paint a lot of in appreciation is from my travels. So I have this painting called Globalization of this tiny little plane that I took from Kathmandu to Pokhara in Nepal. That was probably the scariest plane ride I have ever been on. There was only 2 rows of people sitting and you couldn't even stand up all the way. Like the flight attendant, when she came to give us water, was like kind of bending down to give us the water on that 30-minute flight. And I was inspired one day when I went into my professor's studio. His name is Philip Argent, and he's an amazing abstract painter. And he had this really weird creation on one of his paintings, and I said, "How did you make that shape?" And he said, "Oh, I used a Swiffer." Well, at that time, my mind became blown because I realized, yeah, we're living in the 21st century, and we're making paintings that are kind of reconstructing how painting was used in the past. So I decided I don't need to paint with paintbrushes. I can paint with anything. So that painting has a good example of me using one of those like hand fans to make these really crazy striped lines in the hair, and also using cloth to paint the top, to make a pattern on the top of the airplane, and things like that. So kind of reinventing the way painting has been made. And I'm not the first to do this either. A lot of people are, like, painting today is kind of reinventing how it's been used in the past. And I think to be a contemporary artist today, you really need to think about historically what's been done before and how you can add to that conversation. So I grew up in New Jersey, where it rains and snows maybe half the year. So when I first moved to California, the thing I noticed is that it's so bright and very sunny, and most of my days, because I was living in Southern California, were very blue. The sky was super blue. There are a lot of painters who have changed their palettes after moving to California, and I am definitely one of them. I think my environment affects a lot of what I'm painting. So if I'm in a very sunny environment where everything is super bright, I tend to adapt that in my painting. So it kind of makes me wonder, if I were to move to the desert where everything is a little bit more yellow and orange and red, if that color palette would be adapted into my work, or if I were to move more back to Jersey or maybe to Washington where it rains a little bit more, if my palette would become a little bit more gray and dim. I will say that the desert is an amazing canvas for artists. I really noticed that when we took a trip with my colleagues at UCSB. We went to Joshua Tree, and the thing with the desert is it's so vast, and it's very similar to the color of canvas. Like, it's this tan color, and you can put anything in front of it and it'll really pop out. And as a painter, I love it because you can place the people or the objects that you want to paint and take a photograph of them in the desert, and they'll really pop out behind that kind of neutral background, and then you can take it home and paint it. An artist is constantly experimenting and trying out new things. So something that's really important in my practice is looking at art. I'm always looking at art. I'm going to different exhibitions or museums, especially when I'm traveling. When I go home to New Jersey, I try to go to New York. I always go to New York and check out the museums to really understand what's taking place today for me in painting, but also in other media as well, because that will inspire me. Scientists are constantly coming up with new hypotheses and new experiments to try different things. As artists, as contemporary artists, I feel that we are also coming up and reinventing new ways to paint, and also new subjects matter. So I might find that, okay, right now this is interesting to me. For a while I was painting objects from the home, but now I'm more interested in digging deep into my family and finding out more about my family history. So recently I've been working on projects that are portraits of my family, starting with the one of my father that's called 006, because he claims that he was James Bond before James Bond. So he's 006 and James Bond is 007. So another thing I like to experiment is placing found objects in the work, but not in a way that's obvious, more in a way that's subtle. So it kind of hints at my sense of humor. So one time in graduate school, I was walking to my studio and I found this bike reflector on the floor. And it kind of communicated with me and told me, put me in a painting, put me in a painting. So I was like, okay. So I brought it into my studio and I had it sitting for a while. And then I finally came up with an idea for a painting. And I put the bike reflector in there. When I told my professors about this, they were very cautious, said, oh no, if you put a bike reflector, it might look very strange, it might not go with anything else. So I said, don't worry, I'm gonna make the rest of the painting so wild that people won't notice the reflector until the end. And then it'll be like this punctuation mark at the end that kind of makes you laugh because it's such a random object to place into a painting. So I put the reflector to be the belt buckle, and then I noticed that it needed something else to pop out of it, so for it to all come together. So for the head, I put a block of wood to kind of make it stick out a little bit, and I painted it in a bronze color. And then later, another professor told me, oh, are you calling your husband a blockhead? And I thought that was really funny, and I shared it with him, and he thought it was funny too. So now that's become part of the painting as well.
That's good. That's good.